Amelia was drowning, working double shifts as a nurse, fighting her ex-husband for custody, and racing to see her dying aunt. When she collapsed from exhaustion on a stranger's shoulder during a flight to Toronto, she had no idea that man was Julian Cross, CEO of a tech empire. One viral photo would threaten to destroy everything she'd fought for, but it would also reveal who was truly willing to stand beside her when the world turned against her. This is a story about finding love when you're at your lowest, and discovering that sometimes the right person shows up exactly when you need them most. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Amelia Rivers stood under the flickering fluorescent lights of Seattle Grace Medical Center, her reflection in the bathroom mirror revealing just how exhausted she truly was. Dark circles shadowed her green eyes, and her auburn hair hung limply in a ponytail that had seen better days. It was 2:30 in the morning, and she still had 3 more hours left on her shift as a pediatric nurse. She splashed cold water on her face, hoping it would revive her enough to make it through the rest of the night. Every muscle in her body ached from the double shifts she'd been pulling for the past 6 months. Ever since her divorce from Derek Walsh had been finalized, life had become an endless cycle of work, worry, and barely making ends meet. Her 5-year-old daughter, Ruby, was the only light in Amelia's increasingly dark world. Ruby was everything to her, bright, curious, and full of an infectious joy that made even the hardest days bearable. But lately, Derek had been making threats about revisiting their custody arrangement, claiming that Amelia's long work hours made her an unfit mother. The irony wasn't lost on Amelia. She worked these brutal hours precisely because Derek had left them with nothing but debt and broken promises. He was a successful marketing executive who could easily afford child support, yet he fought her on every payment, questioning every expense, making her justify why Ruby needed new shoes or school supplies. Amelia's phone vibrated in her scrub's pocket, pulling her from her bitter thoughts. She dried her hands and checked the screen. An unknown number from Toronto flashed on the display. Her heart sank even before she answered. Amelia? The voice on the other end was trembling and weak. It's Aunt Margaret. Aunt Margaret, the woman who had raised Amelia after her parents died in a boating accident when she was only 16. Margaret had been her rock, her safe harbor, the only family she had left in the world. But they had drifted apart over the years, separated by distance and the demands of their respective lives. The doctors say it's stage 4, Margaret continued, her voice breaking. They don't think I have much time, sweetheart. I need to see you. Please come to Toronto. Amelia's throat tightened as tears welled in her eyes. I'll be there, Aunt Margaret. I promise. I'll catch the first flight I can. When her shift finally ended at dawn, Amelia rushed home to her small apartment in the Ballard neighborhood. Ruby was still asleep in her bed, her small chest rising and falling peacefully. Amelia sat on the edge of the bed, gently stroking her daughter's soft brown curls. Baby girl, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Mommy has to go away for a few days. Ruby's eyes fluttered open, and when she realized what her mother was saying, they immediately filled with tears. No, Mommy, don't leave me. I have to go see Aunt Margaret, sweetheart. She's very sick and needs me. But Daddy will take care of you, and I'll call you every single day. Derek arrived an hour later, his expression cold and judgmental as always. He stood in the doorway of their small apartment, his designer suit and expensive watch a stark contrast to Amelia's worn jeans and faded sweater. Running off to Canada? He said with barely concealed disdain. This is exactly the kind of impulsive behavior I'm talking about, Amelia. You can't just drop everything and abandon Ruby whenever you feel like it. Amelia's hands clenched into fists at her sides, but she kept her voice steady. I'm not abandoning anyone, Derek. My aunt is dying. This isn't up for discussion. As she packed her small suitcase that evening, guilt weighed heavily on her chest. She kissed Ruby's forehead one last time as her daughter slept, whispering, I'll be back soon, my love. I promise. The next morning, Amelia found herself at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, her heart heavy with anxiety and grief. She had barely slept, her mind racing with worries about Ruby, Margaret, and Derek's ongoing threats. As she made her way through security, she felt utterly alone in the crowded terminal. She didn't know what awaited her in Toronto, but she knew she had no choice. Margaret needed her. and somehow, someway, she would find the strength to face whatever came next. The flight from Seattle to Toronto was packed with business travelers and families. Amelia found her seat near the back of the plane, wedging her small carry-on bag into the overhead compartment. She settled into the middle seat, her body already heavy with exhaustion before the plane even took off. As passengers continued boarding, Amelia pulled out her phone to text Ruby one more time, even though her daughter was with Derek and probably wouldn't see it until later. "I love you to the moon and back, baby girl. Mommy will call you tonight." "Excuse me, I think that's my seat by the window." Amelia looked up to see a man standing in the aisle. He was tall, probably in his mid-30s, with dark hair and warm hazel eyes that held a gentle kindness. He wore a charcoal gray suit that was clearly expensive but not flashy, and he carried a leather briefcase. "Oh, sorry," Amelia said quickly, standing to let him pass. As he settled into his seat, another passenger took the aisle seat, leaving Amelia sandwiched between them. The man by the window noticed her tired expression and offered a polite smile. "Long day?" he asked conversationally. "Long year, more like it," Amelia replied with a weary laugh. "I'm sorry, I'm not usually this gloomy. It's just been a lot." "No apology necessary," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Julian Cross. Amelia Rivers." She shook his hand, noticing the warmth and steadiness of his grip. As the plane took off, Amelia tried to stay awake, but the exhaustion of her double shift combined with the emotional weight of the past 24 hours was overwhelming. Her eyelids grew heavier with each passing moment. Julian pulled out his laptop, working quietly on what appeared to be financial reports. He seemed focused but not stressed, radiating a calm energy that Amelia found oddly comforting. Without realizing it, as sleep overtook her, Amelia's head slowly tilted to the side. In her exhausted state, she unconsciously leaned against Julian's shoulder, her breathing deepening as she finally surrendered to sleep. Julian felt the gentle weight against his shoulder and paused his work. He glanced down at the woman sleeping beside him, noticing the dark circles under her eyes and the tension even sleep couldn't completely erase from her face. Something about her vulnerability touched him deeply. Rather than wake her, he carefully adjusted his position to make her more comfortable, angling his shoulder so her neck wouldn't strain. He continued his work one-handed, occasionally glancing at her peaceful face. When turbulence jolted the plane an hour later, Amelia woke with a start. It took her a moment to realize where she was, and when she did, her face flushed crimson. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she gasped, immediately sitting up straight. "I can't believe I fell asleep on you. I'm mortified." Julian smiled warmly, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Please, don't be. You clearly needed the rest." "I didn't mind at all." Amelia covered her face with her hands, laughing despite her embarrassment. "This is so humiliating. I promise I'm not in the habit of using strangers as pillows." "Well, if it helps, you're a very quiet sleeper." No snoring or drooling involved. That made Amelia laugh genuinely for the first time in weeks. "Well, that's a relief at least." They fell into easy conversation after that. Julian had a way of asking questions that made Amelia feel comfortable opening up. She found herself telling him about Ruby, about how she became a nurse because she wanted to help children, and even about her aunt's illness. "I haven't seen Aunt Margaret in almost 5 years," Amelia admitted, her voice thick with guilt. "Life just got so busy, and now she's dying. I feel like I've wasted so much time." Julian's expression grew serious and compassionate. "You're going to her now? That's what matters. The fact that you dropped everything to be there shows how much you care. I just hope it's not too late." "It's never too late to show someone they're loved," Julian said quietly. Something in his tone made Amelia study his face more carefully. "You sound like you're speaking from experience." Julian nodded slowly. "I lost my father 3 years ago. Cancer. I was running a company, always busy, always promising I'd visit next month. And then one day, there was no next month." He paused, his jaw tightening. "That's actually why I'm on this flight. I'm heading to Toronto for a business meeting, but I've learned to never put work before people anymore." Amelia felt a wave of empathy for this kind stranger. "I'm sorry about your father." "Thank you. It taught me what really matters in life." He turned to her with a gentle smile. "Which is why I'm glad you're going to see your aunt. Don't waste a single moment." They talked for the rest of the flight, and Amelia found herself drawn to Julian's quiet strength and genuine warmth. He listened when she spoke, really listened, not just waiting for his turn to talk. He asked about Ruby with genuine interest, and when Amelia showed him a picture on her phone, his face lit up. "She's beautiful," Julian said sincerely. "She has your eyes." As the plane began its descent into Toronto, Amelia realized she felt lighter than she had in months. This chance encounter with Julian had reminded her that there were still good people in the world, people who cared about others without wanting anything in return. When they landed and gathered their belongings, Julian turned to Amelia one last time. "I know this might sound forward, but would you mind if I gave you my number? I'd like to know how things go with your aunt. And if you need anything while you're in Toronto, anything at all, please don't hesitate to reach out." Amelia hesitated for just a moment, then smiled and pulled out her phone. "I'd like that." As they exchanged numbers and walked together toward baggage claim, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting was more than just coincidence. Julian Cross had appeared in her life at exactly the moment when she needed to remember that kindness still existed. She didn't know it yet, but this man would soon become her anchor in the storm that was about to unfold. The days following Amelia's arrival in Toronto were a blur of hospital visits and precious moments with Aunt Margaret. The older woman was frail, her once vibrant spirit dimmed by illness, but her eyes still sparkled when she saw Amelia walk through the door of her private room at Toronto General Hospital. "My sweet girl," Margaret whispered, reaching out with a trembling hand. "You came." Amelia spent every waking hour by her aunt's bedside, holding her hand and reminiscing about the years after her parents' death when Margaret had taken her in without hesitation. They laughed about burnt dinners and disastrous attempts at teaching Amelia to drive. They cried together too, acknowledging all the time they'd lost. True to his word, Julian had texted Amelia the evening she arrived, simply asking if she'd made it safely. Their messages became a daily occurrence. He checked in each morning, asking about Margaret's condition, and sometimes sent encouraging words that kept Amelia going through the hardest moments. On the third day, Julian surprised her by showing up at the hospital with coffee and pastries from a nearby bakery. "I remembered you mentioned you hadn't been eating much," he said simply, handing her the warm cup. "Thought you could use this." They sat together in the hospital cafeteria, and Amelia found herself pouring out her fears about Margaret's deteriorating condition. Julian listened without judgment, offering comfort through his steady presence rather than empty platitudes. What Amelia didn't notice was the photographer lurking near the hospital entrance. Someone had recognized Julian Cross, CEO of Cross Tech Industries, one of Toronto's most successful technology companies. The photographer had been tailing him, hoping for a story. When Julian walked Amelia back to Margaret's room, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder in a gesture of support, the photographer captured the moment. The angle made it look far more intimate than it was, with Amelia leaning slightly toward Julian, her expression soft and vulnerable. By the next morning, Amelia's phone was exploding with notifications. Confused and alarmed, she opened her social media apps to find her face plastered across multiple gossip sites and blogs. Tech billionaire Julian Cross's mystery woman, new romance blooms at hospital. From beside to bedside, CEO spotted with unknown brunette in romantic embrace. The photo was everywhere, accompanied by wild speculation about who she was and what her relationship with Julian meant. The comments section was brutal. "Gold digger alert. She's obviously after his money. Look at her clothes compared to his suit. She's clearly using him. Another nobody trying to trap a rich man. Pathetic. He could do so much better than her." Amelia's hands shook as she scrolled through hundreds of harsh judgments from complete strangers. Her chest tightened with panic and humiliation. How had a simple moment of friendship been twisted into something so ugly? Her phone rang, and Derek's name flashed on the screen. With a sinking feeling, she answered. "What the hell is this, Amelia?" Derek's voice dripped with venom. "You're supposed to be visiting your dying aunt, and instead you're parading around with some billionaire?" Ruby saw the pictures online. "She's confused and upset." "It's not what it looks like, Derek. He's just a friend who—" "Save it," he cut her off. "I'm documenting all of this. My lawyer will be very interested to know that you abandoned your daughter to chase after rich men in another country. This is exactly the kind of reckless behavior that proves you're an unfit mother." The call ended abruptly, leaving Amelia staring at her phone in shock. Tears streamed down her cheeks as the weight of everything crashed over her. She was being crucified online by strangers, and now Derek was threatening to use this manufactured scandal against her in court. She tried calling Ruby, desperate to explain, but Derek wouldn't let her speak to their daughter. "She doesn't need to hear your excuses right now," he said coldly before hanging up. Amelia felt utterly trapped and alone. She sat in the hospital waiting room, sobbing into her hands, when her phone buzzed with a message from Julian. "I just saw what's happening online. I'm so sorry, Amelia. This is my fault. Can we meet? I want to fix this." 20 minutes later, Julian arrived at the hospital, his expression dark with anger, not at her, but at the situation. He found Amelia in the chapel, her face red and swollen from crying. "This is a nightmare," she whispered. "People are saying terrible things about me, and my ex-husband is threatening to take Ruby away because of this photo. He's going to use it to prove I'm an irresponsible mother." Julian sat beside her, his jaw clenched with determination. "This is not your fault, Amelia. None of it. I'm going to fix this." "How?" "The photo is everywhere. People have already made up their minds about who I am." "Then we'll change their minds," Julian said firmly. "I have a public relations team. We'll release a statement explaining the truth, that we're friends, and that photo was taken completely out of context. We'll make it clear that anyone attacking you will answer to me." Amelia shook her head, fresh tears falling. "That might help with the online harassment, but it won't stop Derek. He's been looking for any excuse to challenge our custody arrangement, and now I've handed him ammunition on a silver platter." Julian reached out and gently took her hand. "Then we'll fight him too. You're not alone in this, Amelia. I meant what I said on the plane. I won't stand by and watch you be torn apart by people who don't know you." "But why?" Amelia asked, her voice breaking. "You barely know me. Why would you put yourself through this?" Julian's hazel eyes met hers with unwavering intensity. "Because in the short time I've known you, I've seen your strength, your devotion to your family, and your capacity for love. You're a good person who deserves better than this. And because—" He paused, his voice softening. "I care about what happens to you." For the first time since the scandal broke, Amelia felt a flicker of hope. She wasn't facing this storm alone anymore. Within hours of their conversation in the chapel, Julian's public relations team sprang into action. A carefully worded statement was released across all major media platforms, clarifying the nature of Julian and Amelia's friendship and condemning the invasion of privacy that had led to the viral photo. The statement was firm and direct. The recent photograph circulating online depicts a moment of friendship and support during a difficult time. Ms. Rivers is in Toronto caring for her terminally ill aunt, and any suggestion of impropriety is both false and harmful. We ask that her privacy be respected during this challenging period. The public response was mixed. While some people backed off and even apologized, others doubled down on their criticism. But what mattered most to Amelia was that the statement had given her some breathing room. What she didn't have room from was Derek's legal assault. 3 days after the photo went viral, Amelia received an official letter from Derek's attorney. He was filing an emergency motion to modify their custody agreement, citing the viral incident as evidence of Amelia's unstable lifestyle and poor judgment. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks away in Seattle. Amelia sat in Margaret's hospital room, the legal documents trembling in her hands. Her aunt, though weak, noticed immediately. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "Derek is trying to take Ruby from me," Amelia whispered, her voice hollow. "He's using that stupid photo as proof that I'm an unfit mother." Margaret's frail hand squeezed Amelia's with surprising strength. "That man has always been a manipulative coward. But you're stronger than him, Amelia. You always have been." Julian arrived an hour later, having sensed something was wrong from Amelia's brief text. When she showed him the legal documents, his expression hardened with determination. "This ends now," he said quietly. "I know one of the best family law attorneys in Seattle. Her name is Victoria Chun, and she's never lost a custody case. I'll have my assistant arrange a video call with her today." "Julian, I can't afford." "You're not paying for anything," he interrupted gently but firmly. "Let me help you, Amelia. Please." That evening, Amelia found herself on a video call with Victoria Chun, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who listened intently as Amelia explained the situation. Victoria's assessment was both reassuring and sobering. "Derek is grasping at straws," Victoria said. "A photograph of you with a friend, taken out of context, isn't grounds for changing custody. However, we need to be prepared. He'll try to paint a picture of you as neglectful and reckless. We need to counter that with documentation of your devotion to Ruby. Over the next week, Amelia worked closely with Victoria, gathering school records, medical records, testimonials from Ruby's teachers and pediatrician, and detailed accounts of her involvement in her daughter's life. Julian helped coordinate everything, his resources making the process smoother than Amelia could have managed alone. But the real turning point came when Julian made an unexpected suggestion. Come back to Seattle a few days early, he said one evening as they sat in the hospital cafeteria. Let me come with you. I want to meet Ruby, and I want to be there at the hearing. Amelia looked at him in surprise. Julian, you've already done so much. You don't need to. I want to, he said, his hazel eyes intense. Amelia, I've watched you fight through one of the hardest weeks of your life with grace and strength. You're an incredible mother, and Ruby deserves to have you in her life. I want to be there to support you both. Something in his voice made Amelia's heart skip. This wasn't just friendship anymore. There was something deeper growing between them, something neither of them had named yet, but both felt. The day before Amelia was scheduled to return to Seattle, Margaret's condition took a turn for the better. The doctors were cautiously optimistic that she had stabilized enough to begin a new treatment protocol. Go, Margaret urged Amelia, her voice stronger than it had been in days. Go fight for my great niece. And Amelia? She smiled knowingly. Don't let that young man slip away. He looks at you the way your uncle used to look at me. The flight back to Seattle felt different from the one that had brought them together. Julian sat beside Amelia, their hands occasionally brushing against each other, neither pulling away. They talked about everything and nothing, but underneath the casual conversation was an electric current of something unspoken. When they landed in Seattle, Julian rented a car and drove Amelia to her apartment. Ruby was with Derek for the weekend, per their custody arrangement, but would be returned the next day. I'm nervous about Ruby meeting you, Amelia admitted as they stood outside her building. She's been through so much with the divorce, and now all of this. Julian smiled gently. Children are more perceptive than we give them credit for. Just let me be myself, and let her be herself. We'll figure it out together. The next afternoon, when Derek dropped Ruby off, the little girl ran into her mother's arms, nearly knocking her over. Amelia held her daughter tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. I missed you so much, baby girl. I missed you too, Mommy. Daddy said you were in trouble, but I told him you never get in trouble because you're good. Amelia's heart clenched at her daughter's innocent faith. She pulled back and smiled. Ruby, there's someone I want you to meet. He's a very special friend who helped Mommy when things were hard. Julian had been waiting in the living room, giving them space for their reunion. When he walked out, Ruby studied him with the serious expression children get when sizing up new adults. Hi, Ruby, Julian said, crouching down to her level. Your mom has told me so much about you. She says you love drawing and that you're learning to play piano. Ruby nodded cautiously. Are you Mommy's boyfriend? The directness of the question made both adults freeze for a moment. Then Julian smiled warmly. Right now, I'm your mom's friend. A really good friend who cares about both of you very much. Ruby seemed to accept this answer. Do you like tea parties? Because Mommy's not very good at them, but she tries. Julian laughed, a genuine sound that made Amelia's heart warm. I would love to have a tea party with you. As Amelia watched Julian sit cross-legged on her living room floor, carefully holding a tiny plastic teacup, while Ruby served him imaginary tea and very real cookies, she felt tears prick her eyes. This man, this kind, patient man, was choosing to be here, choosing to be part of their messy, complicated life. The custody hearing was in 3 days. The battle wasn't over yet, but for the first time, Amelia believed they might actually win. The morning of the custody hearing arrived cold and gray, matching the knot of anxiety in Amelia's stomach. She stood in front of her bathroom mirror, adjusting the simple navy dress she'd chosen, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to fasten her necklace. A gentle knock on the door made her turn. Julian stood there, already dressed in a crisp charcoal suit, looking calm and composed in a way that made her feel slightly more grounded. Let me help, he said softly, stepping behind her to clasp the necklace. His fingers were warm against her neck, and for just a moment, she allowed herself to lean back slightly, drawing strength from his presence. What if I lose her? Amelia whispered, voicing the fear that had kept her awake all night. Julian turned her gently to face him, his hands resting on her shoulders. You won't. You're a devoted mother, and the evidence proves it. Derek is grasping at nothing, and the judge will see that. Ruby emerged from her bedroom, dressed in her favorite purple dress, her brown curls bouncing as she walked. Do I look okay for court, Mommy? Amelia knelt down and hugged her daughter. You look perfect, sweetheart. The courthouse was an imposing building downtown, all marble and echoing hallways. Victoria Chin met them at the entrance, her briefcase in hand and confidence in her stride. Remember, Victoria instructed as they walked toward the courtroom. Stay calm, answer honestly, and let the facts speak for themselves. Inside the courtroom, Derek sat with his lawyer, his expression smug and self-assured. When he saw Julian sitting behind Amelia in the gallery, his jaw tightened with visible irritation. The hearing began with Derek's lawyer presenting his case. He painted Amelia as negligent, citing her long work hours and the viral photo as evidence of poor judgment and inappropriate behavior. He suggested that Ruby would be better served in Derek's stable household with his adequate financial resources. Amelia felt her blood boil as she listened to the distorted version of her life being presented. But Victoria had prepared her well. When it was their turn, Victoria methodically dismantled every argument. She presented Ruby's school records showing perfect attendance and excellent grades, letters from teachers praising Amelia's involvement, and medical records proving Ruby received consistent, quality care. She called Amelia's supervisor from the hospital, who testified about Amelia's dedication and the reason for her demanding schedule. Then Victoria addressed the viral photo directly. Your Honor, this photograph was taken completely out of context during one of the most difficult weeks of Ms. Rivers' life. She was caring for her dying aunt while managing the stress of baseless attacks on her character. Mr. Cross, who is here today, was simply offering support to a friend in crisis. To suggest this demonstrates poor parenting is not only incorrect, but deeply unfair. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes, listened carefully to everything. Then she asked to speak with Ruby privately in her chambers. The 15 minutes Ruby spent with the judge felt like hours. Amelia sat rigidly in her seat, Julian's hand finding hers and squeezing gently. When Ruby emerged, she looked calm, even happy, which Amelia took as a good sign. The judge returned to the bench and surveyed the courtroom before speaking. I've reviewed all the evidence presented today and spoken with Ruby directly. It's clear to this court that Ms. Rivers is a devoted, capable mother who has made significant sacrifices to provide her daughter with a stable, loving home. The photograph in question does not demonstrate neglect or poor judgment. It shows a woman receiving support during a family crisis, which is both natural and healthy. Amelia's heart pounded as the judge continued. Mr. Walsh's motion to modify custody is denied. The current arrangement will remain in place. Furthermore, I'm warning both parties that this court will not tolerate custody being weaponized as a tool for harassment. Any future motions of this nature must be substantiated by genuine concerns for the child's welfare, not personal grievances. Relief flooded through Amelia so powerfully that her knees nearly buckled. She had won. Ruby was still hers. Derek's face turned red with anger, but he said nothing as he stormed out of the courtroom with his lawyer trailing behind. Victoria turned to Amelia with a rare smile. Congratulations. You did beautifully. Outside the courthouse, Ruby threw her arms around Amelia's waist. The judge was really nice, Mommy. She asked me lots of questions about you, and I told her you're the best mommy in the whole world. Amelia crouched down and pulled her daughter into a fierce hug, tears streaming down her face. I love you so much, Ruby. So much. Julian stood nearby, giving them their moment, but Ruby suddenly pulled away from Amelia and walked over to him. Mr. Julian, she said, looking up at him with her serious expression. Thank you for helping my mommy. She cries less when you're around. Julian's eyes glistened as he knelt down to Ruby's level. Your mommy is the strongest person I know. I'm just lucky she lets me be part of your lives. Ruby studied him for a moment, then said with the blunt honesty of a 5-year-old, Are you going to stay? Because if you're going to leave like Daddy did, it would be better if you left now before Mommy gets too sad. The question hung in the air, and Amelia felt her breath catch. She hadn't wanted to pressure Julian. hadn't wanted to assume anything about what this meant for them. Julian looked at Ruby with complete sincerity. I'm not going anywhere, Ruby. Not unless your mom tells me to leave. And even then, I'd probably try to convince her to let me stay. Then he stood and turned to Amelia, his hazel eyes intense and full of emotion. I know this might seem fast, and I know your life is complicated. But somewhere between that flight to Toronto and this moment right here, I fell completely in love with you, Amelia. With your strength, your devotion, your kindness. And I've fallen in love with this incredible little girl too. He reached out and gently took Ruby's hand, then Amelia's, joining them together. I want to be part of this family. Not to replace anyone or fix anything, but just to be here. To support you both, to share the good days and the hard ones, to be someone you can count on. If you'll have me. Amelia felt tears streaming down her face again, but these were different tears. These were tears of joy, of hope, of finally believing that good things could happen to her. Yes, she whispered. Yes, we'll have you. Ruby looked between them and grinned. Does this mean we can have more tea parties? Julian laughed and scooped Ruby up in his arms. All the tea parties you want. 6 months later, Amelia stood in the kitchen of their new home, a modest but comfortable house in a quiet Seattle neighborhood. It was Saturday morning, and through the window, she could see Julian and Ruby in the backyard, building what was supposed to be a birdhouse but looked more like an abstract art project. Aunt Margaret had made a remarkable recovery and had even flown out to visit last month, declaring Julian a keeper and telling Amelia she'd better not let this one get away. Derek had mostly faded into the background, limiting his involvement to scheduled visitation and begrudgingly accepting that his attempts to control Amelia's life were over. Life wasn't perfect. Amelia still worked long hours sometimes, and there were still challenges to navigate. But now she had a partner, someone who showed up for both her and Ruby consistently, who made them laugh and feel safe and loved. Ruby burst through the back door, Julian following behind her. Mommy, Mommy, Julian said, we're having a special dinner tonight. Amelia raised an eyebrow at Julian, who smiled mysteriously. Did he now? That evening, after Ruby was tucked into bed, Julian led Amelia out to the backyard where he'd set up string lights and candles. Soft music played from a speaker, and he pulled her into his arms for a slow dance under the stars. Remember when you fell asleep on my shoulder on that plane? He murmured against her hair. How could I forget? Most embarrassing moment of my life. It was the moment everything changed for me, Julian said softly. I looked at you sleeping there, so exhausted and vulnerable, and something in my chest just knew. This woman, this stranger, was going to change my life. He pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. And you did, Amelia. You and Ruby both. You gave me something I didn't even know I was missing, a family. A purpose beyond work and success. A reason to come home. Amelia felt her eyes fill with happy tears for what felt like the 100th time since meeting this man. You gave us that too. You gave us safety and stability and love when we needed it most. Julian kissed her softly, and in that moment, Amelia thought about how far she'd come from that exhausted, desperate woman on the plane. She'd faced her fears, fought her battles, and come out stronger on the other side. And somewhere along the way, she'd found something she hadn't even been looking for. A love that was patient and kind, a partner who chose her family every single day, and a future that looked brighter than she'd ever dared to imagine. As they swayed together under the stars, Ruby's window glowed softly above them, and Amelia knew that this was what home felt like. Not a place, but the people who choose to stand beside you, who call you theirs, and who make every difficult journey worth taking. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.